At exactly 3:24 p.m. in the House Judiciary Committee hearing room, Attorney General Pam Bondi was about to make the kind of admission that ends political careers. Congressman Frank Mrvan sat calmly across from her, his measured voice betraying none of the devastation he was about to unleash. What happened in the next 73 seconds would expose a shocking breakdown in DOJ oversight that reached the highest levels of American law enforcement. The morning had started routinely enough for Bondi. She'd handled the expected questions about funding, cybersecurity, and district concerns with her usual polish. Her burgundy suit was immaculate, her talking points rehearsed, her confidence intact. After weeks of confirmation battles and media appearances, this felt like familiar territory until Congressman Mrvan shifted the conversation to something Bondi clearly wasn't prepared to discuss. Director Patel was here a couple of weeks ago, Mrvan began, his voice carrying the steady cadence of someone who'd done his homework. And we talked about the emails that went to FBI agents. The room's energy shifted imperceptibly. Staff members looked up from their phones, Bondi's shoulders tensed almost invisibly, but the cameras caught it, that micro-expression of someone realizing they're walking into a minefield. What Mrvan knew, and Bondi apparently didn't expect him to know, was that FBI Director Kash Patel had already blown up her potential defense during his own testimony 2 weeks earlier. In his cramped Capitol Hill office, surrounded by transcripts and timeline charts, Mrvan had spent countless hours dissecting Patel's contradictory statements. The Indiana congressman had built his reputation on meticulous preparation and attention to detail, traits that had served him well as a county prosecutor before entering politics. His staff had created a comprehensive timeline. First, Patel denied the emails existed, then admitted they came from DOJ, then claimed he'd told agents not to comply. Each contradiction had been color-coded and cross-referenced with internal DOJ communications that Mrvan's committee had obtained through subpoena. Mrvan understood something that many of his colleagues missed. The most devastating moments in congressional oversight came not from grandstanding or viral sound bites, but from patient, methodical questioning that exposed the fundamental contradictions in witness testimony. He'd learned this technique during his prosecutorial career, where theatrical courtroom drama was less important than building an airtight case through careful evidence presentation. The contradictions in Patel's testimony were glaring, and now it was Bondi's turn to explain the inexplicable, meaning, please tell us what you did at the end of the week. Give us 5 reasons why you did, Mrvan continued, describing the bizarre directive that had instructed FBI agents to submit weekly reports about their activities. At first, Director Patel said that didn't exist. Then he specifically said, well, that came from the Department of Justice to the FBI agents, and I told them not to fulfill that obligation. Bondi's jaw tightened slightly. She knew she was being boxed in, but she hadn't yet realized how thoroughly Mrvan had prepared for this moment. How do you manage that if you give a directive to your director of FBI and he chooses not to fulfill that? And where did that information go? The questions were surgical in their precision. Mrvan wasn't grandstanding or playing to the cameras. He was methodically dismantling what appeared to be a cover-up in real time. Each question built on the last, creating a logical trap that would soon expose the chaos inside Bondi's DOJ. So when someone from the FBI, an agent, fulfilled that obligation of giving you the information of what they were working on, where did that data go, and how is it secured? The national security implications were staggering. FBI agents work on terrorism cases, organized crime investigations, counterintelligence operations, some of the most sensitive material in the federal government. If they'd been instructed to report their activities to DOJ through unclear channels, the potential for security breaches was enormous. Bondi's response revealed the depth of the problem. Yeah, and Congressman, I'd be happy to see who answered that, but I asked, when I learned about it, I asked that it be withdrawn, and it was that email. I'd be happy to see who answered that. The Attorney General of the United States didn't know who in the FBI had responded to directives from her own department. The admission was staggering, but Mr. Van was just getting started. When you learned about the email going to the FBI agents, you asked them to withdraw it. Who did you ask to have it withdrawn? Bondi's answer would haunt her for the rest of the hearing. My entire office, and it was. So it is unknown who sent that email? The trap was closing. Mr. Van had maneuvered Bondi into a position where any answer would be devastating. Either she didn't know what her own office was doing, or she was lying about her involvement in a potentially illegal surveillance operation targeting FBI agents. Well, it came from my office, but when I learned it went to the FBI, we asked that it be withdrawn. The contradiction was glaring. How could an email come from her office without her knowledge? How could the nation's chief law enforcement officer be so disconnected from communications sent in her name to federal agents? Mr. Van pressed the logical follow-up. Where is the gap in my understanding? If it came from your office, you're telling me you didn't send it? And then came the moment that would define the entire hearing. The admission that no amount of spin could undo. The words that would be replayed millions of times and mocked by comedians for months to come. I didn't realize it went to the FBI. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3.7 seconds. In congressional hearings, 3.7 seconds might as well be an eternity. Committee members exchanged glances. Staff members stopped typing. Even the stenographer's fingers paused over her keys. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, had just admitted she didn't know her own office had sent official communications to FBI agents. The woman responsible for overseeing federal law enforcement had lost track of directives issued in her name to the very agents she was supposed to supervise. But Bondi wasn't done digging her own grave. That email went out, and the purpose of that email was to make sure, just so you know, it was to make sure that these people were sitting at their desk and working and alive, that there were people actually responding. The explanation was absurd on its face. The FBI doesn't need DOJ to verify that agents are alive. This wasn't daycare roll call. These were federal law enforcement professionals working on national security cases. The idea that Bondi's office needed weekly confirmation that FBI agents were breathing bordered on insulting. It could have been, I got up and got a cup of coffee, she added, seemingly unaware that she was making the situation worse with every word. Mr. Van's response was devastating in its simplicity. So, without going into that, the people that did answer it, where did that data go? The question cut to the heart of the national security implications. If FBI agents had actually complied with this bizarre directive, where had their sensitive case information ended up? Who had access to it? How was it being protected? Bondi's answer was the final nail in her credibility. Coffin, I will find out. I will get you that information. I will find out. The Attorney General of the United States needed to find out where sensitive FBI data had gone after being collected by her own department. The admission of ignorance was complete and devastating. In 73 seconds, Congressman Mrvan had systematically exposed what appeared to be either gross incompetence or a deliberate attempt to obscure unauthorized surveillance of FBI agents. Bondi had admitted she didn't know what her office was doing, couldn't account for sensitive data, and had no clear chain of command for issuing directives to federal law enforcement. The immediate aftermath was unlike anything observers had seen in recent confirmation hearings. Social media exploded within minutes. Number Bondi FBI gate began trending immediately, followed by number she didn't realize and number lost control. Within 6 hours, the video clip had been viewed over 12 million times across platforms. Late-night comedy shows scrambled to incorporate the moment into their monologues. Saturday Night Live producers immediately began writing sketches around Bondi's admission, with the "I didn't realize" line becoming an instant punchline. The video clips were devastating. Bondi's admission, "I didn't realize it went to the FBI," became an instant meme. But behind the mockery lay serious questions about national security and government competence. More concerning were the immediate security implications. According to sources within the intelligence community, several allied nations had already expressed private concerns about information-sharing protocols with an apparently dysfunctional DOJ. A senior British intelligence official, speaking anonymously to The Guardian, described the revelation as deeply troubling for operational security across allied networks. The Canadian government reportedly placed a temporary hold on sharing certain classified materials with DOJ until the scope of the communication breakdown could be assessed. Australian intelligence officials began conducting urgent reviews of all joint operations involving American federal law enforcement agencies. Legal experts across the political spectrum expressed bewilderment at Bondi's revelations. Former FBI officials called the email directive unprecedented and potentially dangerous. Intelligence community. Veterans questioned how someone so apparently disconnected from her own department's operations could effectively oversee federal law enforcement. The international reaction was swift and concerned. Allied intelligence services, already nervous about sharing sensitive information with a potentially compromised American system, expressed private alarm about the apparent chaos inside DOJ leadership. Within hours, Republican senators who'd planned to offer unqualified support for Bondi's confirmation began hedging their positions. The admission that she couldn't track her own department's communications with federal agents raised fundamental questions about her fitness for office. Democratic committee members immediately called for additional hearings and document production. If DOJ was issuing unauthorized surveillance directives to FBI agents, Congress needed to understand the scope and purpose of the operation. But perhaps most damaging was the meme-ification of Bondi's response. Social media users began responding, "I didn't realize," to everything from dinner plans to international treaties. The phrase became shorthand for executive incompetence and bureaucratic dysfunction. The deeper implications were even more troubling. If Bondi truly didn't know about the email directive, it suggested a complete breakdown in command structure within DOJ. Senior officials were apparently issuing orders to federal agents without the Attorney General's knowledge or approval. Alternatively, if Bondi did know about the directive but was lying to Congress about her involvement, it suggested a deliberate cover-up of what could constitute illegal surveillance of federal law enforcement officers. Neither explanation inspired confidence in her ability to lead the Department of Justice. Mrvan's methodical destruction of Bondi's credibility became required viewing in law schools and journalism programs as an example of how thorough preparation and precise questioning could expose government dysfunction. His calm, measured approach contrasted sharply with the theatrical grandstanding typical of congressional hearings. The congressman from Indiana had spent weeks preparing for this moment. His staff had meticulously documented the timeline of the email directive, cross-referenced it with Patel's contradictory testimony, and identified the logical inconsistencies that would prove impossible for Bondi to explain. The strategy was devastatingly effective. By remaining calm and factual, Mrvan had allowed Bondi to destroy herself with her own contradictions and admissions. 3 weeks after the hearing, investigative reporters uncovered additional evidence of the email directive's scope. Documents revealed that similar surveillance requests had been sent not just to FBI field offices, but to DEA, ATF, and U.S. Marshals personnel, all without clear legal authority or security protocols. The revelation transformed Bondi's innocent admission into evidence of a systematic attempt to monitor federal law enforcement activities outside normal oversight channels. What had started as embarrassing ignorance now looked like potential criminal conspiracy. Congressional investigators discovered that responses to the score Directive had been collected and stored on unsecured DOJ servers, accessible to political appointees without security clearances. The scope was staggering. Over 340 FBI agents across 23 field offices had responded before Patel intervened, including details about terrorism investigations, organized crime prosecutions, and counterintelligence operations. Most alarming was the discovery that some responses included information about ongoing surveillance operations against suspected Chinese intelligence operatives. A classified damage assessment estimated that 47 national security investigations had been potentially compromised, forcing the termination of several undercover operations and emergency relocation of FBI informants. Bondi's confirmation, once considered inevitable, became politically toxic. Republican senators faced intense pressure from law enforcement, organizations demanding answers about the surveillance program. Democratic opposition research teams had been handed a gift that would define the nominee for months to come. The phrase, "I didn't realize," became a permanent part of American political lexicon, a reminder that in positions of public trust, ignorance is not a defense, but an indictment. Mrvan's 73-second destruction of Pam Bondi proved that sometimes the most devastating political moments come not from dramatic confrontations, but from simple questions that reveal uncomfortable truths. His methodical approach had exposed what bombastic grandstanding never could: the actual workings of a government institution under stress. In the end, Bondi's slip-up became more than just an embarrassing moment. It became a case study in how accountability works when public servants forget they serve the public, not the other way around. The Attorney General of the United States had admitted she didn't control her own department, couldn't track sensitive data, and had issued directives she didn't understand to agents she didn't supervise. In 73 seconds, Frank Mrvan had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon in democratic oversight isn't anger or outrage. It's simple, persistent questions that demand real answers. And sometimes the truth slips out despite every effort to hide it behind political polish and bureaucratic doublespeak. When it does, 73 seconds is all it takes to change everything.